In the silent chess game of the Cold War, survival often depended on one thing: not being seen. Long before digital camo and thermal cloaks, soldiers, spies and field agents relied on an ingenious trick that could mean the difference between capture and escape. It wasn't about technology. It was about understanding how the human eye and mind perceive patterns. This simple yet revolutionary camouflage technique, developed during the height of Cold War tensions, remains one of the most effective concealment strategies ever devised. And yes, it's still used by elite special forces today. This is the untold story of the disruptive pattern principle, the camouflage concept that turned invisibility from a dream into a battlefield reality. The Cold War forced camouflage to evolve beyond colour and into perception. By the 1950s, both NATO and Warsaw Pact militaries had learned that simple green or khaki uniforms were no longer enough. Aerial reconnaissance, infrared optics, and advancing field tactics meant that blending into the environment required more than just matching colours. It demanded breaking the outline of the human body. The human brain is wired to recognize shapes and symmetry, so a soldier's head, shoulders, and limbs stood out even when they wore the same color as their surroundings. The breakthrough came when researchers studying vision psychology realized that contrast, not uniformity, was key. Instead of trying to match the environment perfectly, they began to develop patterns that disrupted recognition. This led to what became known as disruptive pattern material, or DPM, a camouflage made not to blend perfectly, but to confuse the eye. By scattering irregular shapes of contrasting tones, these patterns caused the human brain to struggle, identifying where one form ended and another began. This wasn't just science, it was survival. From British DPM to Soviet KLMK suits, and eventually American ERDL and Woodland designs, the Cold War era gave birth to nearly every camo principle still in use today. Soldiers learned that real concealment came from movement control and shadow. Camouflage clothing alone could never guarantee invisibility. During Cold War field training, soldiers quickly learned that movement was the enemy. A man wearing perfect camouflage who twitched or shifted too suddenly could be spotted instantly, even in dense brush. Soviet reconnaissance manuals emphasized pattern discipline, using stillness, slow, deliberate movement, and terrain shadows to complete the illusion. Western special forces adopted similar doctrines, teaching recruits that camouflage is 80% behavior, 20% material. The secret was how they used shadow to blend, not color. A camouflage soldier would always position themselves on the darker side of terrain features, under trees, behind stones, or in dips in the ground. The Cold War era brought the refinement of shadow mapping, where operators studied how sunlight moved across landscapes throughout the day. They planned routes and ambush positions based on where shadows would naturally fall, using the Earth's rotation as part of their concealment strategy. You can still apply this same principle today. When tracking, hunting, or practicing fieldcraft, pay attention to how your shadow interacts with your surroundings. By staying within natural shade and breaking up your outline with uneven patterns, you'll achieve near-total concealment even with basic gear. The secret formula lay in contrast and texture, not complexity. During the Cold War, Different armies experimented with dozens of colour palettes, but they eventually discovered that contrast mattered more than hue. A camo pattern's effectiveness depended on how light and dark tones interacted, not on matching a single environment. A soldier wearing olive and brown patches could disappear in both woodland and urban rubble because the pattern broke up the body's edges through contrast. This principle led to the design of multi-environment patterns still in use today. For example, the British DPM and later the American multicam didn't copy any one terrain. They relied on the optical blending effect discovered in the Cold War. At a distance, the brain perceives these patterns as textured noise rather than a human shape. That confusion buys precious seconds, enough to stay hidden, reposition, or strike first. For survivalists or bushcrafters, this insight is gold. Instead of obsessing over specific shades, focus on breaking up your outline using contrasting materials. Mix dark and light fabrics, add mud, grass, or charcoal to your gear to distort symmetry. The goal is to confuse recognition, not to mimic nature pixel for pixel. The Cold War camo secret extended to materials that defeated detection technology. As reconnaissance evolved, so did camouflage. By the 1970s, thermal imaging and radar-based detection were emerging on both sides of the Iron Curtain. In response, both Soviet and Western scientists developed materials that absorbed or deflected infrared light. They coated fabrics with carbon and special matte finishes to reduce heat reflection and prevent detection by early infrared scopes. One of the most remarkable developments was the Soviet KZS and KLMK suits, lightweight mesh fabrics coated with reflective compounds that scattered heat signatures. Western forces took the idea further, experimenting with carbon-infused paints and layered textiles. This led to the thermal dampening principle that modern Special Forces uniforms still rely on today. Even without high-tech fabrics, survivalists can apply the same logic in the field. Shiny surfaces, wet materials, and metal reflect light and heat, making you stand out even if your colour blends in. Covering gear with burlap, mud or matte fabric cuts reflectivity and keeps you invisible to both human and mechanical eyes. So, it's the same old Cold War rule, really. Control contrast, kill reflection, and, well, confuse sensors, whether they belong to an enemy or, a drone overhead. Perhaps the most fascinating part of this story is how Cold War agents used camouflage beyond the battlefield. Intelligence operatives learned to disguise not only their bodies, but their entire presence. They used what was called urban camouflage, blending into crowds, clothing styles and social habits. The art of invisibility, you see, became psychological. An agent who moved naturally, wore neutral colours, and avoided standing out was using the same principle as the field soldier: disruption of recognition. Special forces today continue this mental version of camouflage. Whether moving through villages in plain sight or through forests under cover, their success lies in manipulating how others perceive them, not in the perfection of their uniform. That's the enduring Cold War lesson. Invisibility is not about hiding. It's about not being noticed. The Cold War camo legacy proves that invisibility begins with understanding perception. The disruptive pattern principle remains as relevant today as it was when it was born. It taught armies, spies and survivalists that the key to vanishing lies in perception, not perfection. From forest ambushes to urban escapes, the patterns and behaviours developed during the Cold War still define the art of concealment. If you're serious about fieldcraft, bush survival or historical warfare, study these old doctrines. Learn how to move with the land, how light shifts through the day, and how to use contrast rather than colour to vanish. Because every elite soldier, hunter and scout since the Cold War has relied on these same lessons, the invisible foundation of survival that started in the shadow of nuclear fear. If this exploration of forgotten Cold War tactics sparked your curiosity, make sure to subscribe to In the Beginning and share this video with other history and survival enthusiasts. Because understanding the past isn't just about remembering. It's about rediscovering the tools that still protect us today.